We are the God Culture, a group of independent researchers with no affiliation to any denomination nor organization whatsoever. We read the Word and we test it, as 1 Thessalonians 5:21 tells us. Prove all things, hold fast that which is good. It is now time to review all of the resources listed in the references of Ophir, Sheba, Tarshish, and Havilah, the ancient land of Adam and Eve. We review most of these throughout the series, but not necessarily in one place and not necessarily all of them. But now we will deal with all of them and in one place so it's easy to find. We hear from time to time that the Philippines doesn't have peacocks, for instance. And it's not because the person typically knows whether the Philippines does or does not have a peacock. The answer is yes, they do. We'll hear about apes. The Philippines doesn't have apes, does it? Actually, yes, it does. And what we're going to do is systematically go through each of the resources mentioned, and we'll identify each one in a very solid way so we seal this once and for all. However, we will prove that out even further than before, and we will test every resource, even those we did not test before. There aren't many, but there are a few we did not. This will serve as full data for you to know that there is indeed not a 90% or a 98.9% match here, but 100%. And this is strong. The sources are strong, and they are indisputable. And some of them new. So hopefully this will serve as solid education for all. Before we get started, though, a thought from the last video. In, I believe, his first episode of Becoming Filipino, Kulash Jennerman, whom we love, greets Filipinos with appear, disappear. Not sure about the half and quarter parts that he does there, but Filipinos use this high-five greeting saying appear, especially in greeting children, we understand. In the last video, we sound out the actual ancient Hebrew for the words Ophir and Upaz, and we found they begin with an A, not an O, nor a U. We just thought it odd that there is this surviving greeting since antiquity, likely, which may actually have some remnants here. In fact, in comments, Wavemaker, for one, makes a very good point. Ancient Babayin does not include an F sound. So more likely, this would be P, not PH, or the two words for the land of gold would be Apaz or Opaz, AU, the chemical symbol for gold, and Paz, the Hebrew word for gold. Yeah, now that is an original word. Imagine that. And appear, or Ophir, rather than Ophir. Is there a connection here? Not that we can prove completely, but this is interesting indeed. For the king's ships, Solomon's went to Tarshish, yes, a place and equated to Ophir and Sheba, we prove, with the servants of Hiram, king of Tyre. Every 3 years once came the ships of Tarshish, bringing gold, silver, ivory, apes, peacocks. Okay, now some question the every 3 years. Is it actually a 3-year journey, or does it just mean they took a trip one time every 3 years and it could be anywhere? It's funny how people try to parse the language and always do that with this narrative. It's amazing how many times we've heard that, and some are genuine. They're not like the guy that we exposed a couple videos ago. But it's okay to question. There's nothing wrong with that, and we welcome challenges. That's not an issue. But the reality is, as one follows through this whole series, this isn't just 3 years because reading it literally would be a 3-year journey. It's 3 years because when you test the ships, it is a 3-year journey and it does fit. It is 3 years because it does turn out to be the Philippines, which is a 3-year journey from the Red Sea for the ships in those days. So yes, it is definitely 3 years. And we do get people coming in saying, it doesn't say every 3 years. Yeah, it does. And we prove it many times over. So it's not just, you read a scripture and say, oh, well, no, I believe it says. Oh, no, I believe it says. We've tested this way beyond that. We're not relying on, oh, I believe, oh, my gut is telling me. Come on. Not in this series. We've gone way too far with this. So here we have resources that must be available in the region of Ophir, specifically Ophir, Sheba, Tarshish. Got to be there. If it's not there, it cannot be Ophir, which we cover in part 8, eliminates Yemen and Ethiopia completely. Saudi Arabia, out. Moab, bottom of the Indian Ocean. Good luck getting those trees out of there. Anyway, even India's source of gold was the Philippines, in the Indies, not mainland India, and we deal with that too. So we have a 3-year journey, and yes, this most definitely proves out in part 5, especially if anyone wanted to fast forward for a second. To a 3-year round-trip journey, and the ships of that day most certainly were adequate. The Phoenicians, Hiram, king of Tyre, was a Phoenician, and they were the greatest sailors with the greatest fleet in those days, perhaps until Solomon built his, which they still ran for him. So they were the masters of the seas in those days, and they had large ships that may not necessarily go fast like modern ships, no, but they had rows of rowers. So we prove all of that out in part 5. So you'll see that tests out completely. So let's look at each of these. Do we find these resources, every one of them, it's got to be every one, in the Philippines? Gold. Even Wikipedia reports the Philippines has been mining gold since 1000 BC, and yet even today, or in 2008 and 2015, according to really the most credible economic news agency out there, Forbes magazine. Okay, you can dispute that, but it's pretty solid that it is very reputable, as well as it's supported and confirmed in the New York Times report that mining companies assessed the Philippines as having the world's second largest gold reserves on Earth in 2008 and 2015, and they have not been surpassed since. Now, silver we deal with Tarshish, so we're going to lay that aside here and deal with it a few slides later in detail, because it's mentioned again there. So if the Philippines has been mining gold for more than 3,000 years and still is the second largest, well, would that make them number one in all of history? Now we'll show you South Africa's large-scale mining operations, in which they are number one today. Really, they had their gold rush about 100 years ago, a little over. And their history does not go back anywhere near as far concerning gold as the Philippines. It's off by thousands of years. Now you'll see, we'll show you. Ivory. Now, notice it does not say elephants in this passage. It doesn't say elephants. They are not there, except for it is assumed, because ivory, of course, has multiple sources, not just elephants, but that's okay. For instance, the Philippines has discovered ancient rhino bones, according to Smithsonian Magazine and National Geographic. And Pigafetta, the Italian scholar who traveled with Magellan, mentions multiple times he saw elephants in the Philippines. Now, one could say, oh, well, maybe they were brought there by someone else, like the Sultanate of Sulu. Now, when we first recorded this series 2 years ago, Wikipedia actually said that elephants were indigenous to the Philippines and went extinct between 1300 and 1600 AD. Now, that article has been changed to say that they originate from the Sultanate of Sulu, bringing elephants from Sabah, which, by the way, is still part of the ancient Philippines, but no matter. We're going to take this head on. In the next slide, we will put this to bed for good. Elephants, most certainly, were indigenous to the Philippines, and you will see. Now, that article is in Wikipedia, has changed the narrative against actual history, and we'll show you. Apes, or kaf in Hebrew. Now, that does not refer to large apes that many would think of when they hear the word, the connotation that it brings, the Hollywood apes. Nor would Solomon's Navy have been able to really handle such with the resources of that day, at least not very easily at all. Can't imagine them wanting to take on a large ape. At first, we really like the Tarshiye of Tarshish because the etymological connection is so obvious that it at least ties to the land of Tarshish, right? However, we have now located an actual relief in Assyria from the palace there, which depicts the Phoenicians bringing monkeys. In fact, about 100 years after Solomon. And they are likely these same monkeys from this passage. There is an exact tie. Something we don't have much with these kind of ancient references. So it's a beautiful thing, and looking at the monkeys in this relief, they don't look like tarsiers, no. And they are monkeys. They're monkeys with tails, even according to many of the biblical dictionaries. But actually very close, if not exact, to the Philippine long-tailed macaque, which is indigenous to the Philippines, thus the name, of course, and found all over the archipelago and even reported in history also. Some new translations render this baboon instead of ape. Of course, this monkey actually has a face that looks similar to a baboon, which is rather interesting. However, it's not baboon. That's the New International Translation or one of the modern translations, and it really does not have foundation as being a baboon. They're trying to force more than likely Africa into the story, and you just don't do that. It is a small monkey with a tail. That's what it is, according to most scholars, but definitely not a large ape. Now, we have another match. Finally, for this testing, the final resource is the peacock. And once again, endemic to the Philippines is the Palawan peacock in Palawan, of course, and other islands in the south. Now, we have received additional comments that some of the tribes, especially in the mountain province in Luzon, and even some in Visayas, also raise peacocks. But no matter, even pigafetta, when in Palawan specifically, see, matches, in fact observed peacock being served up for dinner, and even saw peacock feathers being used on the top of a ship. So they are ancient and indigenous to the Philippines. No question. So we are 4 for 4. But let's dig a little deeper on the ivory for a moment. This is an article from the Philippine Daily Inquirer, a very reputable source, based on the remains excavated by archaeologists in various sites in Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao, so all over the archipelago. We know that we once had Stegodon, the dinosaur mega elephant with tusks of sort. Elephants and rhinos in the Philippines. Guess they didn't read the Wikipedia article, maybe? Oh, no. These guys prove their position. They even cite dwarf buffalo in Cebu, another possible source of ivory from their horns, and dwarf elephants in Cabaruyan Island in Luzon, which were even named after the anthropologist who discovered them. How does that disappear from the Wikipedia article? Really? How does academia lose such facts? Very sad. H. Otley Beyer and the elephants were named the Elephas bayeri. It seems that elephants roamed the Philippines not just in prehistoric times, but as late as the 17th century, according to Jesuit Ignacio Francisco Alcino in his book from 1668. Alcino noted that the Visayas word for elephant was gadya, and that the ivory garing in Tagalog was used for bracelets, ear pendants, daggers, and sword hilts, and even jewelry boxes. So they even have the use documented for the ivory, which again, we don't actually even need the elephants. We just need the ivory. That's it. In Bolo, these were smaller elephants from Cambodia and India, in other words, different breed from those in Cambodia and India than those places, meaning a unique and not from there, but indigenous to the Philippines. This is a different elephant, and were prized for their ivory tusks. Imagine that. Also, the natives of Iolo eat the flesh of the elephants, so they even eat them. So, were they eating the air and pretending to eat elephant and maybe it was fish? No, they ate elephant. So, this is well documented, well proven in history, and you can already see this is being changed right in front of us, which is amazing to think. But what about the gold? I mean, South Africa is number one, right? Yes, it is number one right now. They are. But have they been mining gold since 1000 BC? Let's see. First, the gold rush in South Africa, where they found large amounts of gold, and they have been number one really ever since that, occurred in South Africa in 1884. Now that's for the last 100 years or so. They've been number one likely ever since. And the Philippines, though, even today, remains number two, even after mining since 1000 BC. And we'll show you this is documented along the way. Even if you don't agree with 1000 BC, that's okay. We'll show you firm dates that we can produce that are indisputable. Part 6 will tell you much on this as well. So when is South Africa recorded, though, as discovering gold for the very first time? Because this is just the gold rush, and we want to be fair here. So what is the origin of gold mining in South Africa? Is it as ancient? Answer, no. About 1100 AD. Now that's 2100 years after the Philippines had been mining gold in bulk, because Solomon came there, and Solomon demanded a lot of gold, an awful lot of gold, many, 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 many tons. In fact, the Queen of Sheba will show you brought 4.5 tons of gold with her as a gift, among other things. So, very serious, very serious. And 2,100 years too late to claim to be Ophir. And in the wrong direction, and lacking the history, and lacking pretty much everything to ever be called Ophir in any sense. Especially being in Ham's land, not Shem's, and Ophir is from Shem. So impossible indeed. Now this makes Philippines number 1 in gold in all of history, not South Africa. This is why gold jewelry of Philippine origin was found in a dig in Egypt dating 1st century AD. This is because Philippine history is not just abundant as the land of gold, its neighbors record it in their own histories as well. The Greeks recorded as the islands of Christ, and we proved that in previous videos and further into the series. The Golden One. India as Suvarnadwipa, the Island of Gold. Chinese, Isles of Gold. The Buddhist Pilgrim, Isle of Gold. The Chinese Mountains of Gold, also Golden Neighbor. Even the medieval Muslims call it Zabag, Land of Gold. And let's show some of this on a timeline to give you a feel of just how far this goes back as being well documented in history long before South Africa even discovered gold. Again, Wikipedia says the Philippines has been mining gold since 1000 BC, but even these references we just showed date this 200 BC for the Buddhist Pilgrim, Isles of Gold, at least 100 BC for Christ's Isles of Gold, and probably predated that. So, but we'll put it at there. 0 BC or so, Philippine gold dated and found in Egypt. 300 AD for the Chinese Isles of Gold, and well, after in 1200 AD still, the land of gold to the Muslims. And Magellan arrived in 1521, and well, recording once again, it was not only the land of gold, but Magellan himself identified specifically the Philippines as Ophir and Tarshish. So did Columbus before him, though he never made it there. That's where he was headed, but thought he did, so started identifying areas and even saying he had the gold of Ophir at his disposal. But he did not, and he didn't know until his death that he wasn't actually in Ophir nor in East Asia where he thought he landed. There are many references we cover in part 6 especially, but not all. We continue throughout the series. So yes, South Africa is number 1 in gold today. We will give them that. Agreed. But it is not number 1 in all of history. That still belongs to the Philippines and will for quite some time remaining, probably till the end of time, frankly. Because it still remains number 2 after mining for 3,000 years, or, to put that in like terms, 2,100 years longer than the South Africans. So there is no comparison really. And even if you were to only credit the Philippines as of 200 BC, the reference we're showing you, it still has 1,300 years ahead of South Africa's just discovering gold, whether alone mining it in the kind of volume that the Philippines was mining it in, especially way back in 1000 BC. There is no comparison here. The Philippines is number 1 in gold in all of history, period. Pigafetta, Racal, Barbosa, Pinto, De Morga, all record this, and they are just a few. The Philippine gold rush began in at least 1000 BC and continues to this day. There's no comparing that. Then we cover several passages about Tarshish in which it mentions more resources. Of course, it also equates it to Ophir and other passages to Sheba. They're in the same region, and we prove that. But we have silver, iron, tin. Could there really be tin in the Philippines? Well, don't tell the British, but we'll show you there is. And lead. Let's prove this out. Silver, we already touched on because much of the silver is mined with gold in many mines. But here's the USGS reporting that the Philippines is down in silver production this year. Particular year is 2014 for this report. But still, an output of 23,000 kilos or 25 tons of silver in a bad year. Yeah, Philippines has and always has had silver. What about iron? From the Philippine Statistics Authority, iron ore, one of the Philippines' largest mineral deposits, is not being extracted at present. That is not rare. The government has a right to protect the environment and its people if that in fact is the case. And so they aren't mining it, but it is the, or among the largest of mineral deposits in the nation. So yeah, they still have it. And according to ABS-CBN, in fact, we can find the reason they aren't mining iron ore is because the government suspended the only miner due to environmental infractions in 2016, in fact. So once again, also proves they obviously were mining something and not just scraping the air, right? So don't know where that stands today, but no matter, we have another check. So what about tin? The Philippines doesn't appear as an area for tin on any of the world maps that we've checked out any. Now, this is not extremely rare, unfortunately, as many things go somehow in this day and age of all ages, uncharted and unreported, even still regarding the Philippines. For instance, they claim red sandalwood when you look up all the charts, and we show this actually in part 4. The red sandalwood only comes from India, roughly, a few areas around it. But the Philippines doesn't make the map yet. It's not just in the Philippines. The very national tree of the Philippines is the Nara, which is a red sandalwood. How do you miss that? Oh well. We found encyclopedias that render tin mining in Mindanao, which is Tarshish, literally to a T. Haha. We prove. In 2005, this reference says, and it's mentioned on the list of Philippine resources. So is it mined today? Not that we can find, but that is impertinent. Is the resource available in the Philippines? And the answer is yes. Check. And what about lead? In the early 1990s, the Philippines had smaller deposits of lead from the U.S. country studies. And from Tagalog lang, there are lesser deposits, but that means they are there, not currently being mined of lead. So we are now 8 for 8 of the resources listed in these scriptures thus far. None of the other countries can boast that, already meaning they are ruled out. But no worries, this becomes completely proven at the end of this video, eliminating all other nations from the contest to claim to be Ophir. And you are still in part 1. Now we want to deal with this one too, as in part 2 we identify the Queen of Sheba as descending from Sheba, brother of Ophir, because that's where her story appears, right in the middle of the journey to Ophir. We prove that out. Check that out. Which is obvious when one reads the narrative, but we have had some who get stuck on things that aren't even in the passage. It's not that they're not good questions. It's nothing wrong with the question. But this is one of them that some people get hung up on. But it's really because they're thinking of the passage improperly. When the Queen of Sheba came to hear the wisdom of Solomon, she brought mega wealth of gifts with her. Just in gold alone, she brought almost 4,000 kilos, or 4.5 tons. Wow. Now this is no joke. That's $168 million in today's value of gold. She came with Solomon's navy from Ophir. We proved that out, but in landing at the port on the Red Sea at Ezion-Geber, she has a challenge. How do you get 4.5 tons of gold? A very great store of spices, as has never been seen in the nation of Israel until that day. That must be a lot. And precious stones, of who knows what weight, and her entire entourage, to Jerusalem, which is 344 kilometers north. So still quite a journey. And through the desert. Well, you hire camels, of course. Did she bring camels from the Philippines? No. Why on earth would that be a requirement? And wouldn't that be rather nonsense, since there are already abundant camels available in Saudi Arabia and that area? So she rented them there. The camels do not have to come from the Philippines, and actually it would make no sense whatsoever for her to load camels on the ship in order to take the cargo once she got there. And the passage never says that her entire journey had to be on camel, nor that she lived in the desert, just that she came into Jerusalem with a great train of camels, and she came from the desert, yes, because she had to go through there from the Red Sea port. She fully fits this passage, so no testing is necessary of the camel. Her 4.5 tons of gold, again in value today, 168 million US dollars. You are looking at the wealthiest woman in that era on all of earth, of anything we have ever seen. That's not her value, by the way. It's only the gold, as the spices had equal or possibly even greater value, some of them. And then she brought precious stones, and we don't know how much. And that is just her offering. Think about that. She is likely the first woman billionaire. Sorry, Oprah, you lose. Now, in this narrative, we have a list of resources. Gold again, spices, precious stones for the Queen of Sheba that she offered as gifts. Then we have Solomon's navy, who gives their gifts, by the way, at the same exact time as the Queen of Sheba, meaning they came together. So they bring from Ophir more gold, now almug trees, and precious stones. So let's test these. Do you notice something? Not only did the Queen of Sheba give her gifts at the same time as Hiram, indicating she came with his navy, but she principally brings the same gifts as Hiram brings. Why? Well, they came from the same place, Ophir. After she says to Solomon that she heard about him and his wisdom in her own land, which would be Ophir. Now, we conduct a very thorough testing, not just of frankincense, but literally every biblical spice recorded in Scripture in Part 12. And guess what? They are all, every one, found in the Philippines. There was only one that we could not identify, but that's because the reference is so vague. And it's a lost spice. I mean, they don't know which one it identifies with in modern terms. No one does. They guess, but no one really does. But let's go for the big one. You know, the one, the rabbis, the ones who own the farms in Ethiopia, claim frankincense only originates from a tree in Ethiopia and nowhere else on earth. Now we test that, and that fails miserably. The word is Old French, originating in about 300 AD or later, so it's not even a Bible term. And the word labona, the Hebrew word used there in Scripture, is typically just generic spices, but that's okay, because the Philippines actually has the frankincense that the perfume companies purchase rather than the price-fixed ones from the rabbis in Ethiopia. See, they're smart like that. They call it poor man's frankincense, not because it is of lesser quality, but because it's cheaper. Why? Because the rabbis don't call it the frankincense of the Bible. And it comes from the Manila LME. Again, we test that thoroughly when you make it that far to Part 12. Gold. Check. We already know that. Already proven. And precious stones. Now, this is something many immediately dismiss, but again, another false narrative. It's just not true. The Philippines has precious stones. Not just according to, facts, but even history, as they are recorded greatly by the Spanish when they came, Pigafetta in 1522 or so, De Morga in 1609, just to name two quick ones. Now we cover many more, but we can list them. Agate, amethyst, calcite, garnet, hematite, jade, pearl, pyrite, quartz, and sphalerite, or however you say that, just to name a few. And that's just from one source, one list. For one claiming some of those are semi-precious stones, so they don't count. Well, then you need to go back and prove that history in 1000 BC knew of such a term and used it, because they did not. All jewels were precious stones, and they are recorded as precious stones by Pigafetta and De Morga, not semi-precious stones. So it's another false narrative to entrap, and we do get that one from time to time. So no, this is a check, and we're not done with it. The UN says the Philippines has pearls, precious stones, etc. right there on their own website. They do not classify them as semi-precious, but as precious stones. So we can check precious stones and gold for Solomon's Navy as well, with Hiram. And the last is the almug or algum wood. We have reviewed many references on this. These are the only two times that this term, and it's almug one time and algum the other, it's the only time it's mentioned in Scripture. And it seems to be generally accepted that this wood, whatever it is, and we put the sources there, is a red sandalwood. And that's where you go to Wikipedia and find the Philippines doesn't have red sandalwood. They're not on the map. They're not on the list. Again, that's funny, because it is the national tree of the Philippines. The Nara is a red sandalwood. And yes, they most certainly do have it, so no, you do not have to go to India. So the only difference between these two references appears to be that Hiram brought almug trees and the Queen of Sheba spices. But where do spices come from? Well, many times, typically, resin from trees. And the Nara tree has an incense resin as well. Thus, really, these are the same. they're offering the same gifts. Some have suggested a closer match etymologically, though. We don't like its resin for this. We like the Nara better. But it's called the Almaquiga tree. Almug. And that does sound very close, we admit, though not a connection we can totally make. That sure is awfully close, but we still like the Nara. Why? Oh, and by the way, if you are keeping track, we are now 14 for 14 in the mentions of resources in these narratives, all found in the Philippines. Let's look further at Nara. But see, we like Nara for this, as it is a red sandalwood fitting the definition, and it has resin. But more so, because Nara is a Hebrew word as well, and one that specifically ties to the story of the Queen of Sheba, the wealthiest woman of her age at least. As in Hebrew, it means she who must be admired. The Queen of Sheba indeed. Nara is an amazing wood, with many lovable qualities, such as its look and moisture resistance, etc. In fact, this reference says it's even a preferred wood for boat making. Now, does that have something to do with a deeper history tied to this wood? That maybe, just maybe, Noah may have used it to build the ark? Oh, keep watching, and you will find we test that too. But wait a minute. Speaking of ships, if the Philippines had such an encounter with Solomon's navy in 1000 BC, then they would have a history in shipbuilding, wouldn't they? I mean, they must have learned something, or even traded for a ship with gold, etc., or maybe even 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 with Solomon, right? I mean, frankly, with the gift that she gave, I would not be surprised if Solomon gave a ship or 2 to the Queen of Sheba for her return trip. But there can't possibly be any history to suggest this, right? Is the Philippines an isolated society prior to the Spanish who saved them from the Dark Ages? Really? By erasing their history and bringing the Dark Ages? Turning them from the wealthiest nation on earth to what is classified as a third world country in modern times? I don't think so. Now that is something for the Jesuits to be proud of. That is a difficult task indeed, losing or really stealing all that wealth, no doubt. Well, we just so happen to be in luck. First, when the Spanish came, they described several 80-foot-long boats. Pigafetta did this, who traveled with Magellan. He called them balangay. That Pigafetta, he must not be able to measure, because certainly the Filipinos couldn't build an 80-foot-long ship without their help, right? Well, you will find many scoffer academics over the past even 200 years who actually do say such in ignorance until they unearthed not just 1, but 9 excavated to date. Balangays, and guess how long? Well, as long as 80 feet, in fact. So Pigafetta, the sailing historian, he kind of knew his ships far better than modern so-called historians, especially those that don't boat at all, claiming to be experts. Pigafetta has them beat, and you don't deny what he says and dismiss it, especially not when it has been found now. Of course, it's no surprise when you lend more credence to a so-called history book, which was written in, say, the 1970s, and claim that that is history, over actual history. But I digress. So, We have firm evidence these ships are dated 300 AD even. Wow. Yeah, we have another check already. Now, Professor Adrian Horridge believes that by 200 BC, now we're way back to the same date that we gave you for being able to firmly establish that gold was being traded, mined and traded from the Philippines. And here you have Austronesian sailors were regularly carrying cloves of cinnamon to India and Sri Lanka. Funny because everybody says Sri Lanka is the origin of cinnamon. Yeah, because that's where the Filipinos took their cinnamon. Does it have a lot still? Yes. Do they grow it there? Yes, there's no doubt. But does it only come from Sri Lanka? It's another one of those things. No, it does not. It may today, for instance, but it certainly did not in ancient times. And perhaps even as far as the coast of Africa in sailboats with outriggers, he says. I know he must be crazy too, except they have built replicas of these ships now, and actually this Balungai has been sailed all the way around the world. So they most certainly could have taken that journey. Oh, and you will find cinnamon, supposedly only comes from Sri Lanka, basically. But you will find it in the Philippines. Guess where they used to get much of their cinnamon? Well, they found in the 1980s Cebu cinnamon. Has been there natively all along. Yep, from the Philippines, who came in their own ships. But not just these smaller 80-foot long boats. No. History records even larger. Pigafetta also described large ships as large as the Spanish vessels, and he describes them in detail, even how they are built. So yeah, he does know his ships, doesn't he? And he is already proven right, and about 10 of them that he saw. They chased the Spanish out of their country with these ships and an armada of over 200 smaller boats. This was a sophisticated shipbuilding culture, according to history, actual history, maybe not history books, which omit actual history, thus not history. Now, they attempt to ignore these ships still, and Spanish records say they decommissioned and destroyed these ships, the largest ships of the Philippines, the junks. So no, you will not find, likely, any archaeology of these. Though who knows, maybe we still will, but they existed. And we also cover Chinese records as well, which record the Filipinos first coming to them in their large ships to trade 800 years before China had an ocean-going vessel, a junk. And funny, because the term junk is not Chinese, and likely refers to the boat that originated in the Philippines. We cover that. See, we just don't know our history generally, unfortunately, because we're not taught. What we are taught is not accurate far too often. But you will know this by the end of this series. So, where are we? 15 resources and 15 checks thus far. And we have just 3 more to go. Oh, but these are the most important 3, and they bring this all home, tie it to the very land. And they are indisputable. Watch this. So remember, the Pisan River encompasses or surrounds the whole land of Havila, where there is gold, and the gold of that land is abundant. Good. Did we not already establish who number 1 in gold in all of history is? Yep, the Philippines. So not just a check, but a number 1 rating, differentiating Philippines as an exact match to this land. Perfection. But there's 2 more. Could that trend continue, maybe? Oh, let's see. And there's bdellium, which is a rare word, only used one other time in Scripture. Scholars debate whether it's pearl or African resin, but we'll settle that right now. Bdellium is the color of the manna in which the Israelites ate, and the only other reference in Scripture that they ate in the wilderness. See the African resin to the right? Yuck. That is not it. It is pearly white, not dirty gunk. And even if it was that resin, well, that's also found in the Philippines, nevertheless. But it's pearl. And guess where the largest pearls in all of Earth are found? All of them in the Philippines. Here's the largest on record in all of history. The Puerto Princesa pearl from the Palawan Sea in the Philippines, 34 kilos or 75 pounds. It's a monster, valued at $130 million US. Add that to the second, the third, the fourth, the fifth, the sixth, and so on, largest because they are all in the Philippines as well. In fact, before these were even found in recent times, the largest pearl on record since the 1930s was also found in the Philippines. There is no other land on Earth that comes even in a close second. And here we go with 2 out of 2 elements not only abundant in the Philippines, but number 1 and number 1. The pearl of the Orient does not disappoint. What are the odds of that? But it's certainly there is no possible way the Philippines could actually lead in all 3 areas of the ancient land of Havilah, the land of Adam and Eve, which we prove the land surrounded by the Pisan River. I mean, they can't possibly match all 3 from thousands of years ago, referring to this land. Could it? Oh, this is neat. And the third, the onyx stone. No, not the jewel, but the onyx stone like marble used in construction for countertop, etc. Guess who has the very strongest onyx, and in great abundance, and marble on all of Earth? Not Carrara, Italy, but Romblon, Philippines. So in identifying the land of Adam and Eve, the Philippines is an exact match to which there is no other nation in the running. And as far as resources, I believe that makes the Philippines 18 for 18 regarding all the resources mentioned in these passages. Sure, you still want to follow bad theories and poor scholarship rather than actual fact. That's up to anyone watching. This isn't up for debate, however, and there is no disproving any of this, nor is there any forcing any other nation on Earth into this narrative, as they would have to match everything and then have the history, archaeology, geography, science, biblical support, and language. The Philippines doesn't just dominate this discussion, it is indisputably ancient Ophir and the land of Havilah, where there is gold, number 1, and pearl, number 1, and the onyx stone, number 1 in all 3 resources on all of Earth. There is no debate on that. But you do not have to agree yet, as you still have a long ways to go in this journey through all the abundant proofs. And we encourage you to do so. So keep going through the series and prove all things for yourself, all the way through, as many have. And no one has disproven these conclusions in 2 years. Though some have tried, the reason is this is truth. Thank you for watching our Solomon's Gold series. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Don't forget to click the bell, or just click on the next screen. Share this video with others, and check out our website at thegodculture.com. Always remember to prove all things for yourself. Yahuwah bless, and on our upcoming conferences in the Philippines, we offer our updated schedule next. As we are getting very close now, this will be quite a month and only the beginning. We also provide a link in the description box below this video for you to click and go and register for the conferences, and we can't wait to meet you there. Yahuwah bless. We are so excited. As our schedule continues to grow for May 2019, we would like to take a moment and thank all those who are praying for these upcoming conferences in the Philippines, and all those who have given to support the effort on Patreon. It is so helpful to have your support going into the schedule and future conferences. We can't wait to get out and meet many of you and deliver the message of Solomon's Gold series to many who have never watched the videos even. This will be a process, but this is a great start beyond our expectations. Around 15 dates are booked now, and what a month this will be. But it will not end there, so if you cannot make a conference, there will be more to come, hopefully for many years. We have had so many step up on so many levels, even some taking on full event responsibility. And thank you to all our hosts who are working so hard to prepare. We also want to thank our partner, Pastor Paul Medrano, who has done so much to make these events a reality. We love you, Pastor Paul and Susan. It's getting close now, and if you feel led, there will be a link on the next screen that you can click and give to support these conferences still. This is not merely an effort of the God culture, but so many. And thank you all so much. The Philippines is truly rising. Rise, Sheba, Ophir, and Tarshish. Rise. Yahuwah bless all.